to do this, and we'll see how vulnerable I am prepared to be in terms of just some of the things that I'm working on, some of the things that I'm struggling with, and hopefully, like I said, you can maybe take these same ideas and concepts and put them to work for yourself. Okay, so I spent this week going through the first couple of chapters. All right, and the names of the chapters, if you will, are really getting into chapter 2, which is the discipline of thinking time, the 5 core disciplines of thinking, and the process of thinking time. And then I will share with you kind of one of the questions that Keith talks about. I think he's got like 700 plus in this book. And one of the keys, if you will, to doing this exercise, a couple times a week, if you will, like really deep into thinking time, is to ask better questions. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but someone's out there surfing, having fun. Okay, so here is the process. So I've got my notes on my iPad, and when I look down, just so you know, like I've probably taken, well, one of my thinking times, if you will, was to actually figure this process out, right? So instead of kind of half-assing it and just trying to wing a 30 to 45 minute thinking time, because I have done thinking time as long as, you know, probably for the past 3 years, but I realized that I was resorting back to old habits. Okay, so here is kind of 7 key distinctions on how he does thinking time. I think Keith has 15 in the book, but I kind of took away the ones that I liked and want to focus on. So number 1 is writing out the question. So starting your thinking time with a question, not coming into thinking time without a question and then trying to figure out what you want to think about. I know it sounds a little weird. However, when you start doing it, you realize that if you get lazy, sometimes I come into thinking time without a question, and then I spend the first 20 minutes trying to come up with a question. Clearing your calendar for 45 minutes to 60 minutes. What he says, I'll get to that in a second here. Creating a question. So there's kind of 3 different ways. You can come into it with a question, with a new question. You can revisit a prior question, or you can expand on a question from a prior thinking time. Thinking time can actually take 2 to 3 sessions to really hammer out or really get to the root core problem. So I thought that was really interesting, because sometimes, it's starting to rain, hopefully it won't be too bad. Sometimes what happens is I would get into a thinking time, spend 45 minutes, and then I would think that I'd had to come up with a solution, right, in that 45 to 60 minutes. And just revisiting and understanding that, you know what, it might actually take me a full week, right, if I do 2 to 3 thinking times in the morning, to actually get to that stage. Okay, no electronics. I suppose I'm kind of breaking the rule a little bit because I put it on my iPad. However, I put it in kind of a sleep mode, so there's really nothing that pops up and interrupts me, so I'm not too concerned about that. I have, he says he always has an empty bullet point at the end of a thinking time. That's something new for me. So essentially when you're writing out possible ideas and concepts and solutions, the extra bullet point at the kind of gets your mind thinking that there's something else that you want to talk about. And what's interesting is, just at a meta level, if you will, as I share this with you, and I look through my own notes, I realize that I'm actually not doing that. So one of the benefits, I guess, of sharing this journey with you is it will hopefully help me get better at this myself. And number 7 is creating a separate file. So you have your thinking time, and then whatever you maybe plan to take away from that thinking time, you actually create like a separate file, another book, something like that, where like your best thoughts that you're gonna put into action, you would do that. Okay, so that is the process of thinking time. Okay, so hopefully I just kind of saved you some time. Get the book though if you want to go deeper. Now, the 5 core disciplines of thinking time. Number 1 is finding the unasked question, getting clarity. Number 2 is separating the problem, which is the obstacle, from the symptom, which is what you see. That is probably the biggest aha moment, and I'm not going to pretend that I have it totally figured out, but I will share a few examples so that hopefully that will help you. His book does a really good job of explaining it. Number 3 is checking assumptions. What is fact from story? Number 4 is considering second order consequences. So when you do this, something else happens that is an outcome that you are unable to control. And number 5 is creating the machine, right? So essentially, what is the plan with resources that you intend to solve, whatever the problem is that you've identified. Now, going deeper into those 5 core disciplines, that's essentially what I want to talk about with you today. And I'm going to give you some examples of how to apply it in commercial real estate. So number 1, a problem is simply an unanswered question. Framing a problem as a statement is a mistake. So here is a good example. Shane, there's no good deals on my market. Or Shane, I don't have enough money to invest in commercial real estate. Like when you frame the problem as a statement, and I hear this often from people I coach, from people I work with, I say it myself. And the challenge with that is if you make it a statement, then it's no longer a problem. It's just a fact. The reality is it's not a fact, right? And I'm not going to get into it, but the last deal I did, or I'm in now, which is $18 million, I was able to get into with, I'm not even going to say it. Put it this way. I was able to get into it with less than $100,000. And if I told you what I really was able to get into it for, you probably wouldn't believe me anyways. So I'm just going to say less than 6 figures. I was able to get into a very large deal, and I am in control of that project. Okay, so let's, this is a question that Keith suggests that you can ask. It's a better framework for asking questions, okay? And so it is, how might I blank so that I can blank, okay? So how might I generate, here's an example, with commercial real estate or any, but is specific to real estate. How might I generate $20,000 a month in cash flow from commercial real estate so that I can stop working, right? What I did is I spent like a couple of minutes just thinking, okay, what are some of the ways that a person could do this, right? I could fix and flip real estate, whether it's multifamily, residential, retail. I could find value add real estate and improve and hold and lease. I could become a broker. I could wholesale. I could find great deals and assign the contracts. I could raise money, essentially creating a fund or becoming a general partner and getting a piece of every deal. I could build or develop properties. I could work for someone else and get a percentage of the deal. I could lease commercial real estate. I could find tenants, and I could bird dog. I could find deals and bring them to investors. So these are all options, if you will, on how a person, and I know, I don't know a lot of wholesalers, to be quite just in all honesty, but I know a few, and when they wholesale a commercial deal, especially when they do it the right way, you know, kind of combining wholesale and bird dogging, they'll make 6 figures on a single property with very little risk. Well, no risk, because they're just putting the property under contract. Okay, so that was the question number 1. Question number 2 is, or not question number 2, but this is like the 5 core disciplines. So this is separating the problem from the symptom. Okay, this is kind of what Keith says. We mistakenly believe the problem is X because we don't have Y, right? I'm paraphrasing. So these are my own notes. The core or the root problem is never the obvious gap between where you are, point A, and where you want to get to, point B. So the key to discovering the gap is finding the obstacle that is in your way. The obstacle is the problem. Okay, so the obstacle is the problem. It's not the symptom. And that is something that has taken me a lot of time to really understand, and I'm still learning it. Okay, I'm just being very transparent with you. So here's an example outside of real estate, and then I'm going to give you a real estate example. So I want to lose weight and get in shape. I think the problem is I need a new training program. P90X, CrossFit, I need a treadmill. Maybe I'll sign up for Peloton. These are all like tactical symptoms or tactical options that you have. But the root problem is I'm not working on or looking at my diet and what I'm eating. And I know this truthfully for myself, right? Like when I was training for my marathon that I completed recently, you know, I did all the training. However, I probably didn't do as good a job. I did a decent job, but not as diligent a job on my diet as I could have. And certainly on the race day, I really screwed that up, but that's for another time. So one of the things that I've heard is you can't out-train a poor diet. And so just kind of taking that into consideration, I think, is important. So let's talk about real estate investing. I want to replace $10,000 to $20,000 a month in passive or residual income. And the questions I hear are, Shane, should I do multifamily, retail, industrial? Should I do value add, core, distressed, ground up development? Should I be a passive investor, an active investor? Should I raise money? See, these are all like, should I join CrossFit? Should I join Peloton? Should I, you know, get a treadmill? Should I run outside? At the root of that, in my experience, here's just some ways to think about it is, like, do you know a good investment from a poor one? This took me a very long time to understand. And it was my mentor, my father-in-law, that really showed me, like, what is a good investment from a poor one? And sometimes we get too close to deals, and it's nice to have an outside perspective to evaluate and help you to determine, like, is this a good deal or is this a crappy deal? Okay, so that's one. Another one is, do you even have the skill set to evaluate real estate, right? I will say when I go into a new market, if I don't understand the rents and the supply and demand in that market, I'm not really qualified to evaluate. Like I can look at properties, I can ask a lot of good questions to drill down and figure it out quickly, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be an expert going into, like I'm in Kelowna right now. I know this market pretty well, but I'm not an expert, right? And so it'd be hard for me to know if I went into an industrial building, because here industrial, it's crazy what people are paying for land. So I'd really have to understand, like, what's the supply and demand right now? What, like, in terms of supply, what's coming on, demand, how much are tenants paying in terms of rent? I'd have to know that with great certainty for me to advise, but at least I know the questions to ask, right? And that comes into the skill set. Are you looking at enough properties every day? Can you invest with a high level of certainty and not lose money, right? Like Warren Buffett's famous phrase, right? Like his number one rule, don't lose money. Number two, go back to number one, don't lose money. Any of the tactics can work, but fundamentally, most real estate investors invest and lose money in the wrong deal because they don't know what they don't know, right? That has been my experience. Generally, when I've lost money in deals or not made as much is because I had improper assumptions, or I really just, I didn't understand the market as well as I should have, okay? Now, to get clarity on that root problem, I'm just gonna get a quick drink here. So to get clarity on that root problem, there's 3 questions Keith suggests. Number 1, what are the possible reasons I'm noticing the symptom? Example, I'm not seeing enough deals. I'm not seeing good deals. I would take that one step further. What is a good deal? Define that good deal for me. I don't have enough capital. Okay, how much do you need? Does it need to be all yours? What isn't, now this is question 2, what isn't happening that if it did would cause the perceived gap or symptom to narrow or disappear? Example, I'm consistently looking at 10 good properties a week in my market that could be potential investments. Question 3 is, what is happening that if I stopped would cause the perceived gap to narrow, right? I kind of laughed at this one because I kept on going and I thought, oh yeah, I've actually seen people do this. I spend 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. I've actually seen people work on projects for 2+ years that were garbage. And because they had so much sunk time, money, energy, resources, they wasted all that energy and effort and money, unfortunately, in the wrong deal. So just eliminating the wrong deals can make a huge impact. So clarity really comes from having like a crystal clear, like, where am I at point A and what is my point B? And then what is that bridge to overcome the obstacle? And what I would say is we're going to get to point B in terms of how to identify that in greater detail. But I think where the challenge comes in is where point A is for a lot of investors. they don't take the time to figure out how much money do I have, what are my resources, who are the relationships, what's the knowledge I have, and what are the gaps that I need to start filling in. All right, let's get to question number 3, which is checking assumptions. I'm just going to keep this real simple. Like, what don't I see? That is a question that Keith asks over and over. And one of the things that I suggest is, and I see it often, is blue sky optimism. And what I mean by that is, like, the downside is usually like the base level, which is like how the property is today. That is like the worst case scenario. And I can tell you, especially when I was watching and speaking with a lot of investors in the US, like their base case was, well, maybe rents will only go up $25. I said, what happens if rents go down $100 a month? And it was just like, I slapped them in the face. Like they couldn't fathom that would actually happen. And I've just been in markets where it's gone down $200 a month. So yeah, it happens. Question number 4, second order consequences. And without getting into the nuances, some of the questions that you may want to ask are, and this is what I ask, what is the upside of the deal? What is the downside? And can I live with the downside? All right. And the last question is number 5, which is creating the machine, right? So I talked about point A, which is clarity on where you're at and clarity on where you want to get to. Personally, I have, I'm pretty good at knowing where I'm at, but where I wanted to get to for a long time, I was chasing a bunch of different opportunities, and I didn't have as much clarity as I do today. And I'm not going to say that I have like that it may not change in the future, but it's pretty ironed out, right? And it doesn't matter what my goals are, right? I share them with very few people I trust, but I have taken a lot of time and spent a lot of money on coaches to help me get that clarity, if you will. Because when you have clarity around what it is that you want to get to, then it's much easier to build the roadmap, to build the blueprint, to build the plan, the machine to go from where you're at to where you want to get to, right? And so Keith talks about your plan will require changes in behavior, will require an allocation of resources and a commitment to doing the work. These are elements that are going to go into your plan, right? Some of the tools you may need: a dashboard, processes, best practices, metrics, and accountability. Okay. So, I'm going to wrap it up here because I got to get to the pool with my kids, even though it's a little bit rainy. For whatever reason, I think when you're in a pool, it doesn't really matter. Kids don't mind the rain. So, I'm going to roll here in about 2 minutes. Here's the question, for thinking time. This is directly from, like I said, Keith Cunningham. Sorry. Hopefully I'm not jostling this phone around too much, but this is the book, The Road Less Stupid. And his question is, this is the question that I'm posing to you. What skills do I need to master to attain the success I want? Now, you can apply it to whatever you're considering. What I would suggest is if you are in commercial real estate or you want to invest in commercial real estate, you would frame the question around that. I'm going to give you how I answered this question, okay? Now, I have started to grow my development arm, right? So I'm doing a lot more developments these days, and I'm loving it. But the skills that I'm weak on are in and around construction, and specifically civil and subsurface. I would say that I am getting better, but I still need more work on the process of development, especially when you're going into different municipalities, because they all have different processes. Managing a team, right? As we do more projects, like I think I have 6 developments on the go right now. So I've got a lot of people and a lot of consultants that I need to manage. Next would be staying organized with all these projects on the go. And so for me, what I did is I went to a couple of key people that I trusted, looked at their processes, and then I actually, my neighbor's just going out in his boat. What I did is I looked at a few, I hired a coach, and this executive coach was, I don't know, I probably spent over $20,000 for him to teach me his process so that I could basically extract what he had taken years to develop. And this is a high performing executive, business owner, leader, and I apply it on my own kind of daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly planning, and it has helped significantly. So the question again is, what skills do I need to master to attain the success I want? I gave you kind of how I'm doing this. Hopefully this is helpful. And next week or the week after, we will get into, you know, the next chapter in the book. So you can follow along and see how it's going. Okay, that's it. Hope this was helpful. See you next week.